Steve Harvey removed his suit jacket and walked toward the audience. No one understood what was happening. The cameras kept rolling, but the game had stopped. The laughter that usually filled the Family Feud studio had vanished, replaced by a silence so heavy you could feel it pressing against your chest. The Thompson family stood frozen at their podium, tears streaming down faces that moments ago had been smiling. And Steve, the man who had made millions laugh for decades, wasn't smiling anymore. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not on a game show. Not in front of cameras. Not with millions watching at home. But sometimes life doesn't care about schedules or scripts or the carefully planned rhythm of entertainment television. Sometimes truth breaks through, raw and unfiltered, and forces everyone in the room to stop pretending everything is okay. What happened next would become one of the most shared moments in Family Feud history. Not because of a funny answer or an unexpected victory, but because of something far more powerful, the moment when a game show host became simply human, and reminded an entire studio, an entire audience watching at home, that behind every contestant, behind every smile, there's a story we never see. The Thompson family had walked onto that stage carrying a secret. A weight so heavy that even the bright lights and loud applause couldn't lift it. And Steve Harvey, with the instinct of someone who's lived through his own valleys, sensed it immediately. But what Steve didn't know yet was that this family's story would change not just the show, but the way he thought about his own purpose. The morning had started like any other Family Feud taping. The studio audience filed in, excited and energetic, ready to cheer for strangers competing for prize money. The Thompson family arrived early, the way families do when they need something desperately but are trying not to show it. Michael Thompson, 42, former construction manager. His wife Jennifer, 39, former nurse. Their 3 children, Emma, 15, Daniel, 12, and little Sophie, 8. They looked like any other family. Middle America. Smiling. Nervous but excited. The kind of contestants producers love because they photograph well and bring genuine energy to the game. But Jennifer's smile was different. If you looked closely, really looked, you could see it didn't quite reach her eyes. Michael cupped his arm around her, not in celebration, but in support. The kind of support that says, "I've got you. We'll get through this. Just hold on a little longer." The warm-up comedian did his job, getting the audience laughing and loose. The crew checked lighting and sound. Steve Harvey emerged from backstage in his signature 3-piece suit, this one a light gray that caught the studio lights perfectly. He waved to the audience with that megawatt smile, shook hands with both families, and the taping began. Round 1 was textbook Family Feud. Steve asked the questions, families gave answers, the audience reacted. The Thompsons were doing well, actually. They'd won the first 2 rounds. Emma had given a particularly clever answer that made Steve do his famous shocked face, turning to the camera with those expressive eyes that said, "Did you hear that?" The audience ate it up. But Steve, who'd been hosting this show for over a decade, who'd met thousands of families, kept glancing at Jennifer Thompson. Something in her posture. The way she gripped the podium just a little too tightly. The way her smile would flicker and fade the moment she thought the cameras weren't on her. During a commercial break, Steve did something he rarely did. He walked over to the Thompson family podium, away from his mark, off script. "You folks doing okay?" he asked quietly, genuine concern in his voice. Michael nodded quickly. "We're great, Steve." "Thank you." But Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. Just for a second. She blinked them away fast, forced the smile back into place, but Steve saw it. And once Steve Harvey sees something, he doesn't unsee it. The taping resumed. Fast money round. The Thompsons were winning. They were going to take home prize money. The audience was cheering. Everything was going according to plan. Steve asked Jennifer the first fast money question. "Name something you pray you'll never lose." It was a standard question. Contestants usually say, keys, or wallet, or phone. Simple answers that get laughs and keep the game moving. Jennifer's voice cracked when she answered. "My family." The way she said it, it wasn't a game show answer. It was a confession. A plea. A statement of fact from someone who'd already lost almost everything else. Steve's smile faltered. He nodded, moved to the next question, but something had shifted in his energy. The professional host was still there, but the man underneath was paying attention now. They finished fast money. The Thompsons won. Confetti fell. The audience cheered. Michael hugged his wife. The kids jumped up and down. They'd won $20,000. A life-changing amount of money for most families. But Jennifer wasn't celebrating. She was crying. Not happy tears. Deep, shaking sobs that she was trying desperately to hold back, to keep inside until the cameras stopped rolling, until she could fall apart in private the way people are supposed to. Steve Harvey stood there with the oversized winner's check, and for the first time in thousands of episodes, he didn't know what to say. This is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. The director signaled to wrap. Credits would roll. The Thompsons would take their check and leave, and the next family would come out, and the machine of television would keep grinding forward the way it always does. But Steve Harvey put the check down. He removed his suit jacket, that expensive, tailored jacket that was part of his signature look, part of the Steve Harvey brand that had made him one of the most recognizable faces on television. He handed the jacket to a producer without looking at them, his eyes locked on Jennifer Thompson, who was still trying to compose herself, still trying to be brave for her kids, still trying to hold together the pieces of whatever had shattered in her life. And then Steve Harvey did something he'd never done in over 2,000 episodes of Family Feud. He walked off the stage. Past his mark. Past the cameras. Into the audience area where families sit after they play. The studio went silent. Producers looked at each other confused. Do we stop rolling? Do we go to commercial? What's happening? But the cameras kept recording because something real was happening, something you can't script or plan or put in a rundown. Steve reached the Thompson family. Michael had his arms around Jennifer. The kids were confused, scared by their mother's tears. And Steve Harvey, this man who'd built a career on being quick-witted and sharp-tongued and always having the perfect response, had no words. He just opened his arms. Jennifer collapsed into them. This stranger, this celebrity, this man she'd only met an hour ago became in that moment what she needed most, someone who saw her pain and didn't look away. The audience didn't know whether to cheer or cry or sit in respectful silence. Most did all three. Steve held her while she sobbed. He didn't rush her. Didn't tell her it would be okay in that hollow way people do when they don't know what else to say. He just stood there, this pillar of strength and unexpected grace, and let her fall apart. When she finally pulled back, Steve kept his hands on her shoulders, looked her in the eyes, and asked the question that would break open the whole story. What happened? Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Michael Thompson took a breath and started talking. Not to the cameras. Not to the audience. To Steve. Like they were the only two people in the room. 6 months ago, I lost my job. Construction company went under. Couldn't find work. We burned through savings trying to keep the house. His voice was steady, but you could hear the shame underneath, the weight of feeling like he'd failed his family. We lost the house 3 months ago. Jennifer added, her voice small. We've been staying with my sister. All 5 of us in her spare bedroom. Emma, the 15-year-old, spoke up, her teenage confidence cracking. I had to change schools. Leave all my friends. I didn't even get to say goodbye to most of them. Daniel, 12, stared at the floor. The kids at the new school make fun of us. They heard about what happened. They call us the homeless family. And then Sophie, 8 years old, with the brutal honesty of children who haven't learned to hide hurt behind polite words. Mommy cries every night. She thinks we can't hear her, but we can. The studio was absolutely silent. You could hear the hum of the cameras. The slight buzz of stage lights. But no one spoke. No one moved. Steve Harvey, who'd interviewed presidents and celebrities and countless families on countless shows, stood there with tears in his eyes. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. Why come on the show carrying all this? Jennifer wiped her face, trying to compose herself. Because for one day, I wanted my kids to see their mom smile again. I wanted them to have fun. To feel normal. To not think about sleeping in someone else's house or wearing donated clothes or wondering if we're going to be okay. She looked at the oversized check lying on the stage. And I'm not going to lie, Steve. We needed that money. We need every penny of that money. That's the deposit on an apartment. That's the first month's rent. That's maybe, finally, getting our own space back. Michael added, we were going to walk out of here, cash that check, and not tell anyone what we're going through. Just be grateful and move on. Try to rebuild. Steve shook his head slowly. No, he said, his voice thick with emotion. No, that's not how this ends. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He turned to the producers, to the executives, to the people who controlled the purse strings and made the decisions about what aired and what didn't. We're not done here, Steve said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a statement. One of the producers approached cautiously. Steve, we need to wrap. We're over time. The next family is waiting. Steve looked at him with an expression that was part compassion, part steel. Then they'll wait. And if they don't want to wait, they can go home. But I'm not leaving this family like this. He turned back to the Thompsons. That $20,000 you just won? That's yours. That's the prize. That's what you earned by playing the game. Michael started to thank him, but Steve held up a hand. But that's not enough. That's not nearly enough for what you've been through. For what you're facing. For what your kids have endured. Steve pulled out his phone right there on the stage, in front of everyone, and made a call. Put it on speaker. This is Steve Harvey. I need you to set up the fund we talked about for situations like this. The Thompson family. Yes. Full first and last month's rent on an apartment. Security deposit. Furniture package. School supplies and clothes for all 3 kids. Yes. And whatever else they need to get back on their feet. Jennifer's hands went to her mouth. Michael's legs almost gave out. The kids didn't fully understand what was happening, but they knew it was something big. The audience erupted. Not the polite applause of a game show audience, but the roar of people witnessing something extraordinary. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the other family, the ones who'd competed against the Thompsons. The Rodriguez family. They'd lost the game fair and square. Usually, losing families go home with some parting gifts and memories. You folks drove here from where? Steve asked them. Mrs. Rodriguez, still processing what she was seeing, answered. Phoenix. About 6 hours. You took time off work? Paid for gas, hotel? She nodded. You're not going home empty-handed, Steve said. You came here, you competed, you showed love to this family even when you were playing against them. That matters. He turned to the producers again. Cut them a check. $5,000. For making the trip, for being part of this moment, for showing grace. The Rodriguez family started crying too. The entire studio was crying. Hardened camera operators. Producers who'd seen thousands of tapings. Audience members who'd come just for a fun afternoon. Because this wasn't about a game show anymore. This was about humanity. About someone with power and resources using them to lift others up. About the simple revolutionary act of seeing people's pain and doing something about it. Steve walked back to his jacket, picked it up, and brought it to Michael Thompson. This jacket? It's custom made. Costs more than I want to admit. But I want you to have it. Michael started to protest. Steve, I can't. Yes, you can, Steve said firmly. And I'm going to tell you why. Right now, you're carrying the weight of feeling like you failed your family. I can see it on you. But you didn't fail. The economy failed you. Bad luck failed you. But you're still standing. You got your family on this stage. You kept them together. You kept them hoping. That takes a kind of strength most people never have to find. He held out the jacket. When you wear this, I want you to remember that you're not just a man who lost his job and his house. You're a man who fought for his family, who kept them whole when everything else fell apart. And now you're a man who's going to rebuild. Not from zero. From here. With help. With support. With people who see you and believe in you. Michael took the jacket with shaking hands. He hugged Steve again, this time not as a contestant to a host, but as one man to another who'd shown him that hope isn't dead, it's just waiting for someone brave enough to offer it. 3 months later, the Thompson family moved into their apartment. Emma went back to school with confidence. Daniel stopped being bullied. Sophie stopped hearing her mother cry at night. And Steve Harvey? He started a foundation that day. Not for publicity. Not for tax breaks. Because he learned something he'd always known but had forgotten in the machinery of fame, that the greatest power any of us has isn't making people laugh. It's making them believe again. The jacket hangs in Michael Thompson's closet. He's never worn it. It's not for wearing. It's a reminder that on the worst day of their lives, when they had nothing left but each other, a stranger saw them. Really saw them. And didn't look away. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten.